they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Joining us now is Onur, Bloomberg's managing editor for the Middle East and North Africa. So once again, President Trump seems to be losing his patience with the war, wants to see a quick resolution, but his messaging seems to be aimed at European allies and NATO allies as opposed to President Putin.
Yeah, that's correct, Jumana. Well, ending the war between Ukraine and Russia was a big election pledge for President Donald Trump, and 3 quarters on since he took office, he has yet to deliver on that. As you said, he seems to be convinced that the easiest way to bring Russia to the negotiating table, if it's not already there, is to basically hit Russia on especially oil exports, which, by the way, are on the rise, as we reported in great detail last week. And much of that Russian oil is obviously going to China and India, but also to some of the key U.S. allies in NATO and European Union, such as Turkey and Hungary, respectively. And we're seeing that Trump is putting pressure on allies in NATO and G7 and the rest of the world to basically follow its lead on what it sees as the push for pushing down Russian oil exports, so that Russia can make little money, and that therefore that will somehow result in Putin more willing to come to terms with Trump on how to
weaker economy.
This war.
But I guess, if you look at these comments, they're specifically targeted mainly at Hungary and Turkey. So less to do with full European nations and more to do with, Hungary, obviously, and then Turkey, important NATO member as well. Why do you think he's opting to go down that track?
Well, not only do those 2 countries, but Russian oil shipments go elsewhere as well. So he seems to think that he needs a grand coalition, so to speak, to stop buying Russian crude. And as an incentive, basically Trump is offering to join the club, if that is the case, by hitting Russia with sanctions. It also, in some way, gives some leeway to Trump in terms of whether or not those sanctions will actually be imposed, because now the burden or the responsibility is not on the U.S. alone, but on a larger group of countries. So it's kind of a politically more convenient way of approaching this for President Trump as well.